Good morning, everybody. That felt like church. It is a kind of church. My name is Emily Jean Brown, and I'm a singer-songwriter based in Brooklyn, New York. I'm so honored to be here today at Creative Mornings. And I just put out my debut full-length record. It's called Coaster. Thank you, thank you. And so if you like what you hear today, please go check it out. I have some CDs and other merch in the lobby, and I'd love to talk to you about music and any other creative things that you're thinking about today. This tune is called Chameleon, and I wrote it. It's a little bit jaded, but I thought with a room full of creatives, there might be something in there that you can relate to. So this tune is about what a creative life can feel like sometimes living in New York City. I'm getting a little bit of in and out on my mic. Are you hearing that in the house, or is it okay out there? All right, great. When the caffeine hits, I'll get to something good. Washing machine swish and a head that's full of should. I read the news and then put down the phone. Seeing all of you makes me glad to be alone. Bare branches in the winter air, another Brooklyn scene. Little babies so unaware of their parents' foolish dreams. But I don't want to impress you, I just want to satisfy myself. But every time that I try to, I turn into someone else. This place makes you a chameleon as a mode of survival, always running for the next train, always waiting for an arrival. And we're all paying rent to subsidize that fiction, that the dollars we spent will help us with our convictions. I don't want to be brutal, want to soften up my ego, but I still crave approval, so where the hell else could we go? Show tickets for an acquaintance, restaurants are so high maintenance. Can't remember what her girlfriend's name is, but she sure dresses clean. Well, I don't want to impress you, I just want to satisfy myself. But every time that I try to, I turn into someone else. This place makes you a chameleon as a mode of survival, always running for the next train, always waiting, and we're still living, tethered to a vision, still living, tethered to a vision. What would happen? What would happen? What would happen if we abandoned mission? What would happen? What could happen? Well, I don't want to impress you, I just want to satisfy myself. But every time that I try to, I turn into someone else. This place made me a chameleon as a mode of survival, always running for the next train, always waiting for an arrival. Thank you. Enjoy the event. Thanks for having me, Creative Mornings.
Well, that was lovely. Can we give another round of applause for Emily Jean? Thank you. want my day to start with Emily singing. That was wonderful. Good Creative Mornings. I'm Tina Roth-Eisenberg. I'm the founder of Creative Mornings and the New York City chapter host. And I am so happy that you all made time to be here and celebrate creativity and curiosity with me. And I would also want to welcome everyone on the live stream. I hope you're cozy in bed, holding a cup of coffee. What an absolute joy to be back at L'Alliance. I call this jokingly the Porsche. I sleep really well before these events at L'Alliance because there's a humongous team of AV and tech people that make everything so easy. And how many of you are new to L'Alliance? By raise of hand. A few of you. Okay. So L'Alliance is the New York City home for French language and Francophone culture. Think of it as a living cultural hub for creative students, working professional, film lovers, and language learners where they all come together. They offer French classes for all levels, a preschool, an exhibition space, performing arts, workshops, and 2 film screenings a week. And I want to point one of them out that caught my eye. Next week, Friday, July 24th, you can catch Menu Plaisir, Les Trois Gros, the final film by legendary documentary filmmaker Frederick Wiseman. And it's a beautiful portrait of the Trois Gros family and their 3 Michelin-starred restaurant, following the rhythms of their daily life, from sourcing ingredients to creating extraordinary meals. And it's a beautiful farewell from one of the greatest documentary filmmakers of our time. And that's just one of the examples. Go check out their calendar of events. Their programming is consistently so thoughtful, adventurous, and outstanding. So Team L'Alliance, we love you so much. Thank you for having us again. And then a big giant thank you for Adobe for helping these events happen. They're our global partner, which means they're fully embedded into our universe in Creative Mornings, and they're thanked at every chapter event around the world in over 70 countries. For example, here in Lisbon, or Bengaluru, or Bogota, Paris, Boulder, Austin, Dallas, or here in Charlotte. Adobe understands that creativity grows in rooms like this, and their global partnership enables us to be the generous, welcoming organization we want to be and aspire to be, and I really appreciate Adobe's support, so thank you so much. All right, 30-second pitches. Who is going to be getting the mic? Crystal.
Hello. Okay, so the people we're inviting for 30-second pitches today is Diana Chen, Gabrielle Gagayo-Gonzalez, Scott Lamb, Shireen Strausberg. So at the end, we'll invite you to the stage.
All right. And please, 30 seconds. I know I want you to listen to the talk, but also know it's 30 seconds, and then Crystal is going to take your mic away when it's over, okay? But we're so excited for your pitches, and I want to congratulate. It takes guts to put your name into the hat, so. All right. One of my favorite moments at every event is when we have one of our community members read our manifesto to remind us of why we do what we do here at Creative Mornings. And today's manifesto reader is Jennifer Summers. When I was looking up her Creative Mornings profile, I realized she is a super attendee. She's been to over 121 Creative Mornings events. And she is also a freshly minted Creative Mornings club host. She leads a club that is very near and dear to my heart. It's called the Handwritten Hour. So when you join her club, you get to spend an hour writing cards and letters while making new analog loving friends. It's funny, this is my daughter right there putting her letter in the mail. The best part, at the end, you walk to the mailbox and mail your letters, which I think is just so wholesome. So your next chance to join Jennifer's Letter Club is on Sunday, July 26th. Mark your calendars at 11 a.m. So Jennifer, I'm a fan. Please take it away.
All right, good morning. Everyone is creative. A creative life requires bravery and action, honesty and hard work. We are here to support you, celebrate with you, and encourage you to make the things you love. We believe in the power of community. We believe in giving a damn. We believe in face-to-face connections, in learning from others, in hugs and in high fives. We bring people together who are driven by passion and purpose, confident that they will inspire one another and inspire change in neighborhoods around the cities and around the world. Everyone is welcome.
I just want to point out that I was tearing up during rehearsal because Jennifer was saying the whole thing out loud, not looking at this. She actually literally learned the manifesto by heart, and that was a first in 18-year history, so thank you. All right, so our clubs are a direct response to what so many of you have been saying to me and my team for years on end, that once a month on a Friday morning is not enough. And we agree because at Creative Mornings we have a saying that a community is not a community until it self-organizes. And boy, ever since we invited you to host and join clubs, you have all been doing an incredible job. Since we started, we have greenlit over 120 clubs in 12 cities, and in total there have been 900 clubs hosted by all of you and over 12,000 attendees. For example, if you're interested, you could join Hansel tomorrow, July 18th, for Bike and Draw, or Trevor hosts amazing food crawls. And last night when I was making these slides, he had one scheduled tomorrow for Sunset Park, and then this morning, he moved it to August 15th. So, but anyway, you can still go. What are you doing on August 15th? Because it's a Sunset Park food crawl. And then, don't worry, I have plans for you for tomorrow because Pam is hosting her infamous Knit Together knitting club tomorrow at 3:30. And Kai is hosting a co-work and mingle cat cafe edition on Sunday the 19th. But there's so many more. These are just the next few days. So if you go to creativemornings.com clubs, you can see all of the upcoming clubs. And if you're like me and you keep wondering these days how you can contribute some good juju into the world, this is one way of doing it. You can make friends around doing something you love by starting a club. If you have an idea for a club and you're a little hesitant about it, Crystal, where are you? There, Crystal was waving. She will get you over the finish line, or you can come to me. I'm so happy to help you think through if you have an idea for a club. And there is one person who is making the club's program possible, and that wonderful human is Ruth Ann Harnish. In 2024, she became our first ever patron, and in 2025, she doubled down and extremely generously continued her financial support of Creative Mornings. She is literally making this friendship engine possible. I believe Ruth Ann and her husband are currently watching the live stream. That's what they told me yesterday, which makes me very happy. So hi, Ruth Ann and Bill. And can you humor me? And let's try something new, because I just find it sometimes really hard to express my gratitude to both Ruth Ann and Bill for their just tremendous generosity. Let's do something silly. Let's do a quick wave for them. So let's go from left to right and back and just like give it your all. Okay, 1, 2, 3. And back, and back, and back, and back. We're going back, we're going back, we're going back. There we go. All right, I hope they saw this. All right, thank you, Ruth Ann Bell. You're great. Are you sufficiently caffeinated? That is the important question. Yes? I hope so. I am. Because we have the Boston University to thank for that. They are our breakfast partner this month. I know some of you were worried last month when we said we lost our breakfast partner. Boston University for the win. And actually, Liz, who made it possible, is here. Liz, just raise your hand for a second. And they want me to tell you, they want you to know that they have a new online master's program in strategic integrated communications, which lets you earn a master's degree in 16 months from wherever you are. It's designed for professionals who want to grow into leadership positions, who doesn't, and who don't have the ability to take time off or move to Boston. So the program is entirely asynchronous, online, and you can take the courses whenever you have time and what fits your schedule. And the stars are aligned because today, this was not planned, at noon, there's a live info session. If this is something that interests you, there's a live info session at noon with the faculty. If you scan that QR code, you can join it. We'll also send the link in the follow-up email. Brian, no pressure, but that would have to be before noon. I'm sure Brian is watching. But BU, thank you for the support. Liz, I love you. All right, so let's play a quick game. I love this, because a lot of you come alone and you don't really know anyone, but now we get to know each other. It's called Stand Up If. I'm going to project sentences to the screen. If they apply to you and you're able to stand up, please stand up. Please stand up if you're silently expecting extra credit for socializing at 8:30 on a Friday morning. I know Paul needs to stand up for this one, I think. Oh, that's not many of you. Stand up if you're visiting from another city. Not that many this time. Okay, who of you three thinks they win, they're from the furthest apart? I mean, they're furthest from New York City. No? He's so sad. That's my cousin Tilo, and he's from Zurich, and he sat back down, so I don't know about... You're from Zurich too? So you both win. Well, what about you? What was that? Maryland? I'm sorry you don't win. I'm so sorry. Zurich is the clear winner today. Stand up if you've ever won a contest. I actually have. Is it a super exciting one that you need to just like scream into this community right now? No? Just, what was that? Parkour? Oh, that's cool. Stand up if you've ever made a friend at Creative Mornings. This is like the only thing we actually measure at Creative Mornings. It's called ROF, Return on Friendship. It's pretty good today. Thank you. Stand up if you're secretly working on a club and we can help you get over the finish line. A few of you, please come and find us. Thank you. Stand up if you're naturally competitive. I'm standing. Ooh, so many of you. I see you. Stand up if you're an introvert. This game is a lot. Let's move on. I'm so sorry, you introverts. Okay. Our theme in July in our global universe is competencia. It was chosen by our Santiago chapter in Chile and illustrated by Valentina Gonzalez. And what an honor to welcome Paul D. Miller, better known as DJ Spooky. Paul has spent his career exploring what happens when art, music, technology, and curiosity collide, all things near and dear to my heart. He's a composer, writer, multimedia artist, and cultural thinker whose work has taken him from Antarctica to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and he has collaborated with artists such as Yoko Ono to Metallica. It is mighty impressive. He's also a National Geographic Emerging Explorer, recognized for using art to help make sense of the rapidly changing world. And today he's working on his forthcoming book, Digital Fictions, The Future of Storytelling, where he explores a question that feels very timely. How are the new emerging technologies like AI changing the stories we tell and the way we tell them? Please join me in giving a big Creative Mornings rockstar welcome applause for Paul D. Miller, aka DJ Spooky.
Good morning. Hey. Being a global DJ, 8 a.m. is not your normal time. I'll just leave it at that. It's been a really pleasant and incredible experience getting to know Tina and the Creative Mornings crew. And I just want to say thank you for coming out. It's Friday, and we are in the middle of the world being on fire, so hey. What I want to do today is kind of open up a situation. I'm in the middle of doing a book that I find very hard to finish. And it's because it's about narrative. And the 21st century, if there's one thing we all have been realizing, is that narrative is the critical input for how things work these days. There was a philosopher several decades ago who coined the term post-truth. And interestingly enough, the election of Donald Trump in 2016 made that become the word of the year for Time magazine at that time. And so what I want to do today is unpack the book. It's called Digital Fiction, The Future of Storytelling. And it's a book that's hard to finish because what is a digital fiction and what is the future of storytelling? It's a continuous evolution. So I'm publishing with Duke University Press. Many of my other books are with MIT. And I generally focus on the intersection of art, technology, and this notion of interdisciplinary approaches to the creative economy. Okay, so let's get started. I'm kind of beginning with this term quantopia, which is a kind of a encapsulation of two words, quantified and utopia. We're in the era of the quantified self, where much of our data and the data about everything we do is a portrait of us. And it's a portrait that is in real time, continuously being monitored, surveyed, and above all, commodified, monetized. And the interesting thing about our time is when you look at books like Orwell's 1984, Brave New World, the list goes on of these ideas of dystopias that somehow have come home to roost, but they're now just kind of like a TV ad, like we really are in the rearview mirror for that. And what's interesting with ideas around complete surveillance is that we live in an ocean of data, and much of that data is part of the actual foundation of what it means to be a subject in this era of digital kind of foundation, a data-driven society. So I wanted to kind of bring you guys into this quantopia situation and give you a sense of, if you were a writer in the 21st century trying to finish a book that's unfinishable, what would you do? All right, so let's go back in time a little bit. So I was born in 1970. Both my parents were professors. My dad was dean of Howard University's law school, and my mother was a historian of design. As you can see, she was really into Paisley, which is a very 60s kind of thing. And one of the things about growing up in Washington, D.C. at the time is you had this deep sort of resonance with what was going on with the federal government versus the local. And I grew up near DuPont Circle, which is a very beautiful area. It's where all the embassies are. And my mom, we had a family store called Toasted Strawberries at Connecticut and R. And if anybody knows Washington, D.C., there was a couple other family-owned businesses. There are Kramer Books, for example, just off of DuPont Circle. It's a famous bookstore. They're all family businesses, so we all kind of knew each other. And above all, there was a sense that if you owned your business, you had a stakehold in the community. And so my mom supported women designers quite extensively. And that was something I grew up with, how people were empowered by design. And as an African-American progressive family, my dad, because he was dean of Howard University's law school, some of the cases that he took on pro bono were people like Angela Davis, who's a legendary Black Panther. The government was throwing everything they could at these people at the time. And any, sort of people who were protesting the Vietnam War, the Nixon administration, et cetera. So for my parents, they were like, whoa, it couldn't get any worse than Nixon. And yet, here we are. So what I want to do today is unpack some of the issues that go into how we think about the framework of a story and how a story affects everything you do, its narrative. So here we are, and I want to ask you guys for a second, let's just go quiet for a moment. I want you to listen to the room around you. What you're hearing is the sound of the air monitors, the electric hum, and also your body's circulation. So whenever you listen to things, your ears are creating an electromagnetic relationship to synapses in the brain, translating that into thought. And interestingly enough, New York City and America in general has so much electricity moving through all of the currents around us that people have actually studied that it changes the tone of the earth. So we're in a room and a city and a nation state and a continent that's vibrating at about 60 hertz, which would be about B flat. And in Europe, because their electricity is at 220, they are in G. So anyone, if you ever walk through Times Square, for example, and close your eyes and listen to the hum, the whole city is a symphony. And it's a symphony of electricity, of noise, of density, but there's a critical component, which is the root note. And in music, the root note is always something that gives you an overtone. You have to be able to think of octaves, you have to be able to think of different kinds of arpeggiation, tonality, structure, and above all, pattern recognition. So to me at least, a city, a continent, whether you're thinking about the globalization of information and data, The thing that holds it all together right now is electricity. And so, too, with the brain. So, interesting enough, your brain is basically a series of collections of neurons. The neurons then create further synapses and then create more of a gestalt. And many of the kind of data analysis of the human body, mind, and so on in motion that we now have, that's why I began this term of the quantified self. We have to really think that the human mind is one of the most complex phenomena in the actual universe. And there's a lot of studies that show we're unsure of actually how the mind works. Is there a spirit inside? Is the electrical combination of all of the different ways that the electrical chemicals interact, is that which section goes to the idea of identity? Which section goes to the idea of time? And above all, which section goes to the relationship of the social process that guides what a data-driven society interfaces with? So here we are in 2026, where much of the world is now data-driven. And we are in what they call the creative economy. And from my book's perspective, I'm basing mostly on the kind of global idea of what is a creative economy, because the production of physical goods, we've had centuries of capitalism and scarcity, and things of like, kind of, whether it's looking at manufacturing, shipping, all of those things, there has to be this notion of pattern recognition, and that's how we organize a society. And above all, the way we organize things is through narrative. And so one of the things that really struck me when I was commissioned to come up with this is I was thinking about how do we give people this notion of the meta story, of the story over the story, or the understory, as some people would call it. Michio Kaku, I love this phrase, that the human brain has over 100 billion neurons. Each neuron is connected to 10,000 other neurons. And so the idea that your brain is the most complicated object in the known universe is very clear. And our basic sense of how we look at digital culture is that we're trying to figure that out. We're turning our nervous system almost into things like the internet. So the philosopher Marshall McLuhan coined this term, the medium is the massage, in the 1960s. But here we are in 2026, where again, that's in the rearview mirror, where we're in much more of an immersive mediated state. And one could argue that the geopolitics of our time is about what they call data sovereignty. And most nation states right now are looking at information warfare, computational propaganda, and above all, influence campaigns. So social media is this place where there's now more bots than there are people. And many theoreticians have now called that the dead internet theory. And so from my perspective as an artist, that's interesting. Like, how do we think about one of the most complex machinery that humans have ever made, the electricity that drives it, the way our brains interact with it, but through the prism of thought. And interestingly enough, most platforms, and this is very well-known research, there's a loop that creates an interface with you, and it's about addiction. So the dopamine hit, the serotonin hit, all of those things, they've been studying and quantifying this, whether you're at Facebook/Meta, whether you're at Google, whether you're at Apple. Your average person touches their cell phone over 3,000 times a day, which is more than you interface with other human beings. We've developed a relationship to the devices around us, the data that configures our thought, and above all, the emotional relationship to that. And the economy now has moved further and further into this data-driven narrative. And what's interesting about that from the arts point of view is that, from my perspective, the imagination is the ultimate renewable resource. How do we get people to reimagine what is possible in an era where data has circumscribed the human subjectivity of our time? So if you're writing a book about this, you're looking at an infinite hall of mirrors stretching into the distance, because it's not going to end. And I would say unless we turn off everything, which most people, if you talk to a 17-year-old kid and you take their TikTok away, trust me, you're not going to be having that happen. So what's going to happen is people evolve into different relationships with the platforms. And that's interesting from the viewpoint of storytelling. So there was a theoretician named Marc Augé who coined the term non-places. And interesting enough, data centers are the par exemplar example of a non-place. He's an architectural critic that was fascinated with the study of how we've reached this standardization of physical spaces, airports, post offices, shopping malls, corridors in all sorts of different spaces that reflect this kind of almost like the movie The Matrix, where you're going through these corridors that are eerily seamless and similar, and you're given this sense of an uncanny relationship. Uncanny comes back time and time again in my book. It comes from the German term unheimlich, which means the unhomely, but it's also spooky. And so data centers right now, there's about 5,000 plus in the United States. Data centers are controversial at every level. And above all, they deplete resources at every level and emit huge amounts of carbon. And one of the things that really makes you come home to roost about this is the rapid depletion of water. And it's fascinating because our bodies are also water. We're about 80 to 90% water. And these are things where the human mass overconsumption that's going on with the 21st century has really, from one could argue, come home to roost as this data collides into physical reality. And people think of like the cloud, where your data goes, your cell phone and so on, the towers around us, but there's still a physical impact, a physical infrastructure. And from my perspective, the data center as the place of non-place is the beginning of the meta story. So this is the first data center, and it was at ENIAC at University of Pennsylvania in 1946. And interesting enough, the first data center was run by women. And there was a couple male scientists who were kind of making sure they were in patriarchal control. But the women were called computers. And interesting, if you go back to the history of computing, there's a very distinct relationship with how women engaged with mathematics. And so the women would then, earlier during the World War II, women were calculating trajectory of ballistic missiles, they were calculating all sorts of shipping routes, logistics, and there would be rooms filled with women doing mathematics, and then a couple guys would come in and take that and send it to bombers or to missile strikes or cannons or whatever. But the women were the ones making it all work. And from my perspective, that's a very intriguing reflection of the origins of digital culture. Why is it that we give credit to the father of computing, like Alan Turing, which was cool. I really like Alan Turing. But I would rather know what these women were thinking. And so from my perspective, there's always that hidden dimension of our time where we misallocate or misalign how we think about history. And that's, again, a new way of rethinking the story of the story. So I want to take you to what I now call the Stone Age social ledger. So this is crypto for the Neolithic era. Intriguing enough, this is an island called Yap, and amusing enough, Milton Friedman, who's a legendary economist, did his PhD on this island, and here's why. On this island, whenever you did a transaction, they would mark the transaction by about 20 to 30 people having to carry a huge stone across the island. So if I traded you 2 cows for 400 coconuts, they would then carry these, they're called rye stones. And so everyone knew the transaction had occurred. And you would get a big stone in front of the place where the transaction occurred. So the island's littered with these stones. And basically, there's a very famous phrase of the Stone Age wouldn't end for lack of stone, because you have plenty of stone. You could easily, people have to come up with better ideas. So one day, there was a transaction that occurred where one of the stones fell in the water. And basically, they couldn't get it back because they just had a raft. And they were trying to figure out, we can't get this, so they just left it. So that became a virtual marker of a virtual transaction. And so Milton Friedman found that really fascinating about the social production of value. And intriguing enough, that stone became a new kind of social ledger because everyone knew that, that was a stone that nobody can get. It's kind of under the ocean. We're going to refer to it as a virtual spot over there. We all know it's there. And the transaction occurred, and everyone just kept moving. But that reference point of the virtual transaction, a lot of people then felt that that's the beginning of what we call now the social ledger, which is the foundation of cryptocurrency. So I always like to think of this as this kind of overlay of the digital and the physical, but from a different era. And so if you really think about our time right now, every device we have is a subject relationship to how we think about value. And above all, how we monetize that. And that's why there's a philosopher and writer named Cory Doctorow. He has a term called enshittification. So basically now everything's a subscription. And there was a big controversy recently. I have a BMW, and they were trying to get everyone who had a BMW to get a subscription to have your heat on your seat, And there was a big outrage, and so you would have had to pay $30 or $40 a month just to have the little heat kind of on your seat. So people got mad, and they pulled back. But if you have a Tesla, anybody who has a car or anything right now, we're moving to that subscription-based model because of the pattern. You have to continuously think about how pattern creates value. And so from my perspective right now, the reason I'm kind of connecting dots between the urban landscape, electrification, thinking about the mass spectacle of data. These are all things that drive their economy. And one could argue America's now being held up, propped up by the AI economy. And many people are calling this the AI data bubble, financial bubble, and so on. So one of my favorite mathematicians is a gentleman by the name of Gottfried von Leibniz. And he's considered one of the more important mathematicians. He happened to invent a magical thing called calculus. He's German, and the Brits and Germans have a bitter dispute about this because the Brits say it was Newton, and there's a lot of controversy between. I would side with the Germans on this one. But he has a great phrase where it says, "Music is the pleasure the human mind experiences from counting without being aware that it's counting." So we all do pattern recognition, and we all have an intuitive relationship to the idea of the data of mass numbers. And we're all thinking about numbers every day, all the time. And so, interestingly enough, and I'm going to keep using that term interesting enough because I want to make sure to kind of repeat and reinforce. How we think about pattern recognition is how we begin to think about narrative. So when I'm working on the book, and by the way, I'm workshopping this off of you guys, so I'm kind of like, I'm doing an intuitive, like they laughed at that one, they didn't laugh at that one. So by the end, you'll have a book that maybe reflects some of that. But when you go from that idea of the mathematics of intuition and how we think about pattern recognition, this is probably one of the most famous philosophers of the last several centuries. But there also was a term that came out of that same time period called rationality, ratio, proportion. And so there was other philosophers like Immanuel Kant and so on. But I like the idea that right now we're in the era of Leibniz because he really got this era of mass numbers and this notion of numeracy as a core part of intuition. So let's take you a little further back. And by the way, this is a project called A True Story, and it's the first science fiction novel. It was written by Lucian of Samosata in the 2nd century AD. And basically, it was a magical tale where basically some guys go to the moon, and there's a war between the Sun King and the Moon King. And they have like aliens, they go to different planets. And he didn't like Homer's Odyssey, so he wrote this as a satire of that. And so it became very popular as a satire, and so most historians view this as the first science fiction novel. And I like the fact that, again, I began my talk with this idea of post-truth. One could argue this is one of the first versions where they just threw the notion of truth aside and came up with this wildly fictional thing of people going to other planets, people being able to have different relationships to interstellar phenomena, and that is basically science fiction. Now, if we look to the other slide, that's the first voting machine. In Athenian democracy, there was a moment where they overthrew a group of people called the oligarchs, which we are now very familiar with oligarchs. But there was a collective called the oligarchs, and when they overthrew them, they were like, we never want to have people controlling the city-state again. And one of these ideas of Greek city-states was they were all laboratories of different modes of governance. So you had Sparta, Thebes, Athens, they were all having slightly different kinds of government. Mainly the conflict was between Sparta and Athens. And again, depending on your frame of reference, I would be more on the Athenian side of things, but some people like Sparta. I mean, who knows? But when you were in Athens after the overthrow of the oligarchs, they instituted these devices where everyone was given a citizenship chip that they could put in for voting. And you had to continuously vote on various issues of the nation state or the city state. And so many historians consider this to be the first voting machine. But interesting enough, again, sorry to use that term, you have to imagine that it was all math. And so everyone was able to participate, and this was considered to be a mandated phenomena of participating in the city-states polis. That means politics, the same root word, Greek. Polis means city. So politics means the evolution of the city. And wildly, these kind of devices were just small chips that everyone who was able to vote, which regretfully was mostly men and mostly property owners, they didn't get DEI back then yet. But how we think about this idea of being a stakeholder in the narrative of the city, this is the first idea of the participation machine. And I'm fascinated with that and the connection between Lucian of Samosata and this idea of the first, it was called the Claroterion, by the way, this idea of the first voting machine dealing with the mathematics of the city. This is something that will come back as a reframe. So I'm going to fast forward. By the way, you guys hopefully are noticing I'm doing this as a non-linear kind of approach, and that means you're DJing with me. So here we go. So I'm going to fast forward from the city-state and being a stakeholder and having to participate with this idea of the kind of chip that we would put in the voting machine to 1969. And why I'm skipping about 1,000 plus years is because we have that sense of overview of time as a fragmented space right now in the 21st century. We can kind of think of it as a hyper collage or a mega mix. So what you're going to see here is the first idea of the router. And the reason I'm going from the first voting machine to the first router is, you'll see in a second. And hopefully we got the sound. I'll just make sure. I'm going to hit the slide, and if the sound doesn't go, just make a signal or something. But here we go.
We've just entered a historic site here at UCLA. This location is where the internet began, and it began with that piece of equipment. That's the first piece of equipment ever put on the internet. It's what you call a router today. This was 1969. In October of 1969, we had this first switch here at UCLA, and by October, we had the second switch up at Stanford Research Institute. The experiment we wanted to perform was to send a message up to SRI. Now, what kind of a message should we send? A really good one, like Armstrong from the moon, he said, "A giant leap for mankind"? Or Samuel Morse, "What hath God wrought"? Or Alexander Graham Bell, "Come here, Watson, I need you"? Those guys were smart. They understood public relations and media. We were nerds. We didn't have a message prepared. All we wanted to do was log in from here to SRI. To do that, you have to type L-O-G, and that machine will type the IN. So we're ready to go. Type the L, you get the L, got the L. Type the O, you get the O, got the O. Type the G, you get the G. Crash. The SRI machine crashed. So the first message ever on the internet by accident was low, as in lo and behold. We couldn't have asked for more prophetic, more powerful, more succinct message than that. And so here we are years later, and this machine and that message launched what you now call the internet. This is Len Kleinrock at UCLA, and here we see the first router, the first piece of equipment of the internet ever. Let's look inside. This machine is so ugly, it's beautiful. And there it is, technology from 1969. This is the machine that launched the internet. So I'd like to welcome you tonight to DJ Spooky's Entertainment.
All right. So that was, Music of 2019, right before the pandemic, was the 50th anniversary of the internet, and people hadn't realized that the first routers were at UCLA. So they commissioned me to do a symphony celebrating the 50th anniversary of the internet. That's online, by the way. It's called Quantopia. And so fun ways of thinking about what would a symphony be about the internet was, I was like, let me think about composition with data, because there's no way that you can have one pattern about the internet. And so what I ended up doing is having different string ensembles play, and then I sampled them, then I ran them through what you would call a logarithmic process. And logarithmic versus exponential growth is really fascinating, because the internet itself, one could argue, has grown way past any sense of exponential growth. So those are the first 4 hubs of the internet in 1969. UCLA was the first hub. They're very proud of that. There's a big placard at UCLA saying the internet started here. But one can always go to the understory or the overstory, depending on your perspective, and you realize it comes out of this thing called ARPANET, which was a US defense military contract for making a communications network that would be able to survive if there was a nuclear war. So the US military helped commission this through ARPANET. ARPANET gave the funding and various technological support, but they wanted to run it as a major hub for universities to be able to send files academically and so on. And so the gentleman that you just saw, Dr. Leonard Kleinrock, they made a film about it with Werner Herzog. And if you haven't seen it, it's a really interesting film about how the internet started. It's called Lo and Behold, after that thing you just heard. So Werner Herzog's one of my favorite filmmakers, and again, we're looking at this idea of the narrative, the story, how you would describe digital fiction. So going from that voting machine where the narrative of the city-state was a very simple chip, going earlier to, I was showing you that example of a Neolithic currency where people are exchanging value over stones. You can really see this idea of the intangibility of things. There's a very famous phrase from Marx and Engels where they say, all that is solid melts into the air. And This is Dr. Leonard Klenrock looking at that first, it was called IMP, Interface Message Processor. And so from 1969 to 2026, we've seen the entire world being engulfed by data. And so from my perspective, there's this notion of the Anthropocene, the human agency that has made the notion of engaging with the planet as a human sensibility. And if we can't narrate our way into or out of it, then how do we think about it? So I want to take you to 1957. This is Sputnik, and this is the first satellite really to go around the world, and it emitted a bleep every couple seconds. It was for triangulation and navigation. And interesting enough, that's the first sound ever heard around the world. It would just, everyone who had amateur radios, had all sorts of stuff, would hear this little bleep. So everyone began to turn their radios on to just listen to this little bleep. And it gave a very periodic signal. And they were able to use that to map atmospheric, magnetic interference, all sorts of stuff. But this idea of the under versus over story is something that lingers over the conversation. And I want to respect everyone's time. So what you're hearing is a workshop of my book as a story. And I thought, let me give them a sense of how this would be fun, but also give them some takeaway tools, some thoughts about storytelling. So let's start you with one of the largest objects that we inhabit, this. We'll dial it into this, and then we're going to dial it into this. And you can easily see the same pattern, actually. It's called morphogenesis. So being able to understand how patterns work in the body, we can see from the human to the macro scale, and we can also think about pattern recognition and the human sense of agency. So I want to respect the time because I think I want to leave some time for questions. But when we can't think about something, we can't think about it. So this is a philosophical sensibility of what would happen. It's harder to think about the end of capitalism than the end of the world. And that's a famous phrase from a philosopher who passed away a little while ago. But I'm fascinated with that idea that how can we move forward and get that sense of renewing the imagination with narrative and giving people better tools for critical thinking. And I think that's going to be one of the most important issues as we move further into this data-driven society, is that people can't imagine what they can't imagine. And so these are things where we have to rethink what it means to be human in an era of information. So I'm going to do two last slides. And this gentleman here, you're very familiar with him, but you didn't know it. His name is Al-Khwarizmi, and he was in Baghdad, and he wrote a book that invented what we now call algebra. And amusingly enough, the Europeans didn't know how to pronounce his name, so his name was Al-Khwarizmi, and they kept mispronouncing it, so they called his style of mathematics algebra, and they also brought his numbers over. So all the Arabic numbers that we use, 1, 2, 3, and so on, were popularized by him and a gentleman by the name of Fibonacci. And I love the fact that this gentleman also, he's a fun fact, his name is also used for algorithm. So the Europeans didn't know how to pronounce his name, and so algebra was the math that he created, but he wanted to get people to think about pattern recognition and structure. So his name is the root term of algorithm. And so it's an Arabic term, and I'm fascinated with looking at how these interconnected phenomena give people a better sense of engagement. There's a sound? Okay. Yeah, I was like, whoa. Okay. So, okay. So there we go. The world intervenes. I know I have 2 more slides, and then that's going to wrap it. We'll open up to questions. Does somebody's phone?
We're working on it. We're working on it. He's trying to grab it.
All right. Okay, that's a perfect comment. Yeah.
It really is.
All right, so
okay, let's give a round of applause for Paul before we go into Q&A.
Thanks. So, by way of conclusion, his name, algorithm, now drives most of what we kind of think about. So, there you go.
The phone keeps
Tina,
going.
how
For
do you
those
wanna
of
do
you
it?
who can hear it, there's a phone going off,
Yeah.
and it's like stuck somewhere in between the seats. And now everyone's
believe
helping.
you have signal.
Everyone's helping. See, this is our community right there. Community is not a community until it self-organizes. Okay. It's still going. It's in the fabric. It's melting into the chair.
Actually, you guys, it's spooky. There we go. So Tina, how do you want to do
Let's
the
see.
question?
Who has a question for Paul?
And it's very relaxed. I mean, I have lots of other stuff to riff on.
Okay, it's literally in the chair. For those on the live stream, there is a phone ringing and a really beautiful sound.
I don't
And
have signal.
there's about 6
I-
people trying to get it out of the cushion of the chair. This is literally one of my favorite Creative Mornings moments in history.
Okay. Yeah.
Woo, we did it! We did it!
Okay.
Oh, Stefan, I'm coming. Stefan Sackmeister is asking a question. How cool is that?
Hey, Stefan, how you doing? Hey.
I have a question about critical thinking. My favorite professors as I was growing up were all promoting critical thinking. And for a long time, I felt this was it. But then in real life, in meetings, I felt that the person who had problems, or basically who tried to criticize the things that we talked about, was always the dumbest person in the room. And I felt that it was so much more difficult to think originally, to come up with an idea, or make an existing idea better, than to criticize an existing idea or system. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting point. The way that I like to sort of position this, there's a philosopher named Jean Baudrillard, who is a great, he's kind of the guy who's the philosopher of the film The Matrix. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend the film. Millennials, there was a film called The Matrix. But he wrote a book called The Gulf War Did Not Take Place, because I'm old enough to remember the first Gulf War, and now we're in like the fourth, maybe. But he was fascinated with the way the television of the war took over from, and he coined the term hyperrealism, or journeys in hyper-reality. And of course, now, giving people access to this idea of how do you envision different dimensions of information. There's a really good book by Edwin Abbott called Flatlands, and a dot thinks it gets everything, but it's only in 1 or 2 dimensions. Then a sphere comes down and says to the dot, hey man, you only see 2 dimensions, I got 3. And then they go up 1 more dimension and 1 more dimension, and so on. It's a really cool parable of how dimensions work. But when you critique something, you're probably only seeing an angle of it, and then you're only kind of getting that perspective, but there's other perspective. Like, you know, so I always like to give people, try and see it from a different point of view, do it as a thought experiment, a thought exercise, and give yourself a new design interface, a user interface for rethinking perspectives. And I think that that's a helpful thought experiment that we could probably have a lot more of. Right now, because of late stage capitalism, people can't imagine outside of capitalism. And it's really a thing that's roiling philosophy, it's roiling the arts. People aren't quite sure what is next. Like how we organize economic activity has really put a sort of blinders on us. And we're still straitjacketed in this notion of scarcity and things like that, where we're probably, you know, there's more food than we would ever need. There's more clothes than anyone would ever need. There's pretty much, we could stop most production and still have a reasonable life for years to come, except with perishables. But, you know, most people only wear 10% of their clothes, for example. I always like that statistic. But you open their closet and they have just insane amount of stuff, and they barely even use it. But they're conditioned by hyperconsumption, by the ideology of capital and status and other issues that give them a sense of being a stakeholder in this illusion. I hope that answered the question. I don't know. Yeah, the world is fucked up. Hey, there we go. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your comments. It's been fascinating. And I guess the question I had was that this data focus, this technology focus is excellent and certainly very important, but I felt that there was a need for more balance. You talked about how the data centers were using so much water, and 60% of the U.S. was experiencing drought, et cetera, and where's the human balance? That if most of our bodies are water, we need water.
Yeah.
And so there has to be a balance between technology and the actual world in terms of where we live, the food, the seas, the air quality, just the fact like this smoke from Canada is coming and we can't be outside, so on and so forth. And I guess that's the piece that I was looking, that we live in a real world, on a real planet, where we're losing resources, we're losing water, we're losing air quality, et cetera. And all of this technology is not going to save us. So there has to be a balance between the human body and what we need to survive, air, water, breathing, all that good stuff, food, and the technology. And so I think that's when we maximize everything.
Yeah, amen. I agree. The beauty of what you just said was we still have this weird sense that technology is separate from us, but it's not. And this idea of design interface is a really important thought process for me, how we think about giving people better tools. And imagine if you like I was showing you that island of Yap, where the guys had the rye stones, and that was their first transaction. But I want to show you another example, and this is a map that Da Vinci made in 1502. He was commissioned by, there was a war going on, and they needed a map to be able to show the battle lines of this city called Imola. And so he invented this style of what you call axonometric representation. So you can imagine the city from above, but they didn't have satellites back then. So he was able to conceptually change his perspective to think from above. And eerily enough, if you fast forward several hundred years later, this is Google Maps of the same place. So he was able to imagine the city and imagine the dimensionality and be able to think several hundred years ahead of how we had satellites in orbit, and we were able to get the same. I mean, it's eerily precise. So I like that as kind of reimagining, and the human imagination is powerful. If we can imagine something, we can usually try and figure it out. And right now, because of the coercive nature of data and digital culture, our imaginations are being crippled. That's my personal working theory. It's like, how do we give people better tools? Yeah.
What an amazing example to end on. How do we need to shift our perspective? Paul, that was amazing. Thank you. Thank you. I wish we could listen to all the other slides you still wanted to share with us next time. We'll have version 2 of this. Anyone agree? I wish we could just stay here. I know. Let's do this again, Paul. Thank you. All right, 30-second pictures. Actually, this should be 30-second pictures. I'm so sorry, 30-second pictures. It just says thank you now. But come on up on stage, the 4 of you that were mentioned before.
Yes,
keep in mind, 30 seconds.
Shireen, Diana, Gabrielle, and Scott. Come to the stage. Stairs right over here. Amazing. And then once you do your 30-second pitch, just go to the wings and Brianna will get your information. So Scott, would you like to come first? And then I'll play the xylophone when we reach 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you so much. Just real quick show of hands, how many writers in the room today? A lot. And how many people in the last week have written something? A text, an email, notes, right? My name is Scott Lamb. I work at medium.com. We're a reading and writing company. And my pitch is we're launching a new app to help you write more. We believe that everyone is a writer. And we'd love to have you come and try it out. So if you would like an invite, I'd love to get some of the people in the room in using this as we're figuring out what it is very early. It's really, really cool. I'd love to have you there. So just email me, scott@medium.com. Very easy to remember, and I'll send you an invite for our new app. It's called TK, and it's designed to help you write more. And I love it. I use it every day. I think you'd love it too if you want to write more. Thank you.
Hello, Creative Mornings. My name is Gabrielle Gaigoy-Gonzalez. I'm here with Women's Media Group, and we are co-hosting a luncheon series with Ms. Magazine in support of feminist writers and women journalists. We're looking for a venue for our spring luncheon panel, so if you have any recommendations as far as like a woman-owned restaurant that would want our business, or you know of a sponsor, please come find me or email me through the email that you're going to get after this, because it's a very long email address, or go to womensmediagroup.org to learn more about our events.
Hi everyone, I'm Shireen from 87th Street Creative. It's an animation and motion design studio on a mission to make women's healthcare understandable, visual, and destigmatized through animated explainer videos. Thank you. Would you agree that the healthcare industry's got a lot of explaining to do? Animation can help with that. I am always looking for new projects, new clients, new collaborators. If you know of any companies, nonprofits, or freelance creative directors that need an animation partner, find me after this. Thank you. Humanizing healthcare, one story at a time.
Hi everyone, I'm Diana Chen, founder of Books Like the Fire, a personal growth community for women who love to read nonfiction books that spark real conversations about life. So we just read Think and Grow Rich. I wrote my desire statement. I feel vulnerable about it, but I'm gonna share it here. I welcome 25 members by December 6th here. So if you know of someone, or if it's you, we'd love for you to join. BooksLikeTheFire.com.
Please let us know when you find the 25 and more members. We're going to be excited. Thank you, 30-second pictures. You will get all of their information in the follow-up email. Oh, look, there was my slide. There's 2 thank yous. I like it. Thank you. Thank you. Anyway, sorry. This is me getting lost in my slide work. Without our volunteer teams, our events would never be this smooth. So let us thank our entire New York City volunteer crew: Alicia, Angelica, Brian, Brianna, Crystal, Ella, Finn, Isabel, Kat, Kate, Kevin, Krista, Kristen, Leah, Lenny, Meredith, Sue, Whitney. Normally, you clap for these. Let's do it. Thanks. And thanks to Nelson, you can see photos of yourself and how good you look early in the morning. Thanks to Connie, you can watch this again. And thanks to Matt, the legend, there is a live stream every month. And next month, before I let you go, next month we have James Ian tell us his story, his very moving story, at Museum of Art and Design at Columbus Circle on August 28th. James is a multifaceted human. I'm very happy I got to meet him just recently. He's an actor, model, singer, songwriter, poet. He has spinal muscular atrophy type 3 and is a passionate advocate for authentic representation of disabled artists in music, TV, film, and other media. He will also, this is the first time ever, he will also be our musical act of the morning. He's an incredible singer. So you are really all in for a big treat in August. James is a force. And as always, I want to leave you with a quote. This month is by Rebecca Solnit. I still think the real revolution is to make the world safe for poetry, meandering, for the frail and vulnerable, the rare and obscure, the impractical, local, and small. Thank you for joining Creative Mornings. Thank you, L'Alliance. Thank you, Paul. And see you next